Neil McMurray started a blog in Jersey called Voice for Children in about 2007 when the Jersey child abuse scandal started to emerge. And he's been a thorn in the side of the establishment since then, with some other bloggers, principally because the mainstream media in Jersey and, in fact, a broader range of media who came to the island when the scandal broke seemed unwilling to report the real story. Anyone who's interested in this interview, I would absolutely recommend should watch a Storyville programme which is on the BBC iPlayer. I think it's going to be on there for the next year, and it's called Dark Secrets of a $1 Trillion Island, and it relates to the child abuse scandal. And Neil, you're going to tell us a little bit about that for us. You and another person were citizen bloggers starting in around 2007, and you're attributed, both of you, to having got the public inquiry, the investigation into the scandal, because of the lack of proper media attention to detail with regard to what was actually happening. So tell us a little bit about you starting off in 2007 with the scandal suddenly starting to get a bit of traction, and the police getting involved and doing something about it.
Yeah, thanks for inviting me on. And 2007, late 2007, 2008, Operation Rectangle went public. And that was a investigation into non-recent child abuse, institutional child abuse at the Sea Cadets. That's where it started, and it went on to the now infamous home, Hope de la Garenne.
Yeah.
I'd had experience prior to 2007 report alleged child abuse to the correct authorities. And I soon realised that the establishments and everything are there to protect itself. They just clamp down, shut down. And when Operation and of course, and the media, I had gone to the media with reports of alleged, wrongdoing, and soon thought that's, they were part of the cover-up. And you couldn't say that on, out loud, because people will, I thought people look, I think you're a nutcase if you think the media are in on the scam. But of course, as things unfolded, that's what did turn out to be. So Rectangle was live, and there's huge international and national media interest in this, of decades and decades of abuse going on. So Lenny Harper was a senior investigating police officer. Graham Power, so for those who have seen the documentary, was the chief police officer. They were turning over stones and going into places that the establishment didn't want them to go. They were exposing Jersey's dirty secrets, and of course this was with our establishment island. It's all about Jersey's reputation. Everything else is secondary. And it came about that this police investigation, the powers that be wanted it stopped, wanted it shut down. I think it was about 192, survivors came forward, alleged survivors came forward to this. It was a huge success in that way. But massive news. And then I could talk to you for hours about the whole Operation Rectangle, how the media turned against the senior investigating officer, Lenny Harper. They turned against Graham Power.
When you say the media, Neil, do you mean Jersey media? Do you mean the media in Jersey or the national UK media?
It started off the Jersey media. They were all what you call on message. They were all there to discredit Lenny Harper and Graham Power. They did so many stories about Lenny Harper because of his expenses, they went after him for, as they do, for his expenses. He spent too much money there. And I was reading all these articles and seeing all these broadcasts, and I thought, well, not one of these journalists ever asked Lenny Harper for his comment, for his side of events. And we used to get accused, people used to say, oh, you bloggers, you only put out one side of the story, or you're very biased, you only put out one side of the story. Well, they're right. We did only put out one side of the story, because the other side of the story was being put out by the mainstream media. So what we were doing as bloggers, myself, Rico Sorda, there was others, Polo, who runs his own blog, Tony's Musings, Trevor Pittman. There was a lot of bloggers, and we were telling the other side. We were adding balance to what the mainstream media was putting out, the absolute propaganda and smear that the mainstream media was putting out against these two honest, ethical policemen.
And they're shown in the documentary, aren't they? You can see them answering questions, and they definitely come across as very reasonable policemen from my perspective. And they were genuinely, I think, in wanting to find what had happened, actually were thinking that they had crimes to look into, to investigate, and they weren't going to leave any stone unturned. And that seemed to be a real problem, didn't it, for the establishment?
It was a huge problem, and the independent Jersey Care Inquiry found that Lenny Harper and Graham Powell, that the Operation Rectangle, they were right to start looking. This was found by the independent. See, the huge problem with all this is that one of Graham Power's words was, he said, we're being criticised by those people who did something, criticised by those who did nothing. What he's saying is we investigated. It was an investigation, and the powers that be were saying, well, you could have done this, you should have done that. So look, we did something, but they just wanted to attack this because it was bad for business. They needed to attack and discredit Lenny Harper in particular. And Graham Power said it again in one of the interviews that I did with him, is that those who made this into a story about how much Lenny Harper spent in a London restaurant, ought to be ashamed of themselves. What does it matter? They were investigating decades and decades of child abuse that have been covered up, concealed, all those years. So, and they both inevitably paid the price.
What price did they pay? What happened to them?
Well, of course, Lenny Harper, he was up to retire anyway, which he did.
Right.
He retired and moved back to the UK. Of course, Graham Power was here holding the mantle, if you like. And as is in the documentary, he got possibly illegally suspended, and it came out in the Care Inquiry. And it wasn't in a documentary, which I wish it was, because the person, Andrew Lewis, the then Home Affairs Minister, who suspended Graham Power, was found to have lied regarding his suspension, the reasons for suspension. To this day, we don't know why the Chief of Police was suspended, because the Home Affairs Minister at the time, Andrew Lewis, had said, he just told so many different stories. And of course, this came out in the Care Inquiry. Now, what you've got to remember is that hundreds of people gave evidence to this independent Jersey Care Inquiry, hundreds of witnesses. Only one was called a liar. And that was the man who suspended Graham Power.
Right.
So, but of course, there's a flip side to the problem with this is as well. You had to swear an oath when you gave evidence to this public inquiry, and if you public inquiry, you could be up for perjury, which carries a heavy prison sentence. Well, it came out that Andrew Lewis did swear an oath, like every other witness or most other witnesses. But the thing is, he was protected by parliamentary privilege, as he was a politician. So he, like you or I, and all the abuse survivors and others that gave witnesses, wouldn't face perjury, a charge of perjury. You or I, or the survivors and everything, would have, if we'd have lied to the kid. So it's a pity that wasn't shown, because that was a massive, massive turn of events when how they suspended the chief of police. And then so many people from then on thought, we knew this is a cover-up, this is a stitch-up, and then, of course, as it was shown in the documentary, Mick Gradwell and David Walkup took over the Operation Rectangle, the police investigation, and then did this big media circus, we call it, saying, everything that Lenny Harper did was all rubbish, and everything was, and there's been no murders, and there's,
and were they police themselves?
Yeah, they were the policemen that replaced the original.
From the Jersey force?
I don't know. I think they come from the
they
UK,
come over from the UK.
Yeah,
they come over from the UK and were employed as a senior investigating officer, Mick Gradwell, and the David Walkup was the acting chief of police, whilst Graham Power was suspended. So
one of the reasons for cover-up was, as you say, was the financial reputation of Jersey. But do you get the impression people were covering up the actual perpetrators of abuse? Quite apart from trying to protect the reputation as a kind of tax haven, they were covering up the actual perpetrators, or protecting them.
There's people now in positions of authority who were named at the Care inquiry. In people's statements, that not everybody's name was made public, but still in positions of power now. So in Jersey, it's not what you know, it's who you know. There are a prolific paedophile. I've read a lot of evidence. One particular prolific paedophile, allegedly tortured this person, who I've spoken to personally and seen their police statements. Back in 1980, these police statements were made. So, I've got no reason to disbelieve this survivor. But of course, as it got seen in the documentary, where William Ballash was then the Attorney General, he dropped 12 cases, refused to charge 11 or 12 in cases. And this alleged perpetrator, was one of those cases. Now, it's widely believed that the perpetrator is actually a friend or acquaintance of William Ballash, who dropped all these cases. And of course, the problem with that is, in Jersey, where it's different, you have a Crown Prosecution Service, an independent prosecution service in the UK. We don't have that in Jersey. We have an Attorney General who advises the executive, advises the it's the scrutiny of the non-executive in our Parliament. He also decides who gets prosecuted and who doesn't get prosecuted.
And does that mean, Neil, that influential paedophiles, or that paedophiles are still in influential positions in Jersey and able to protect each other? That's still going on?
For sure. Yeah. And I know serial rapists, that yes, there are people in positions who should never be in a position still now to this day. I think that the huge problem here is that nothing has changed. In the independent Jersey Care inquiry, so much more evidence came out, in the public. And evidence that I wasn't aware of, and I've been, believe me, myself, Rico Sorda and others, Stuart Sivray, we've lived and breathed this stuff for years. And a lot of evidence come out in the Care inquiry that we hadn't heard about, that we weren't aware of. Yet still nobody, as a result of all this evidence, nobody has faced any charges, any prosecutions, so nobody has been prosecuted as a result for any of the evidence that came out in the Care inquiry.
And has anybody been suspended other than the policeman?
Well, the irony of this is...
Can I ask about one of the senators? Because Senator Stuart Sivray was the only one up to 2007 in Parliament actually keeping on about this being a problem, wasn't he? And he's been locked up twice since then. Is that right, Neil? Locked up, not just
twice
lost
or three
a job.
Times.
Right.
Yeah.
And how come?
It's hard to keep track of the court cases and imprisonments that Stuart's had. That they got him on a trumped-up data protection charge. I don't think this come out in the documentary, if I recall, but he was taken to a secret court. Now, I know in the UK and across the secret courts are only for family courts or matters of national security.
Yeah.
Terrorists. He had named 4 individuals on his blog and accused them of different things. Now, the Data Protection Commissioner rallied these four people together, trying to rally a 5th person together that wouldn't have anything to do with it. Anyway, and made to bring Stuart to court, saying that he caused them stress and harm about what he wrote on the internet. Not that what he wrote was not true; it was a fact. So, if you're saying something, of course it would cause them stress and harm. Whether he's telling the truth or a lie. So they could have and should have gone for him with defamation, libel, or anything like that. But instead, they didn't. The Data Protection Commissioner got these people together. Spent, I think, it's around about £300,000 to prosecute Stuart for a breach of data protection or something. I can't even be too sure. And it appears that he's subject to a super injunction. So as a result of this secret, not so secret court case, they've gone after Stuart massively. They've gone after others. There was Trevor and Shona Pittman, who were 2 outspoken opposition politicians, and they were speaking up and out against the child abuse and the subsequent cover-up of it. They ended up being, cut a long story short, they ended up being bankrupted. Now, if you're bankrupted over here, you can't sit in the legislature, if you're a politician. So I think their newspaper took call, our only newspaper, the Jersey Evening Post, and an estate agent for what they thought was libel or defamation. I can't remember. Anyway, they lost the case, and they racked up, I don't know, £100,000, £200,000 court fees. Now, between them, they were earning about £90,000, Trevor and Shona Pittman, as politicians. So if one of them, if they owed me £100,000, I'll be making sure they got to work every bloody day. And so they can, because half a loaf is better than no bread at all. So if they're earning money, they can pay me, in increments, the £100,000 they owe me. But they didn't. They bankrupted the Pittmans. So therefore, they're earning no money now. But we believe this was a huge political move to get them out of the Parliament, because once they're bankrupted, they lose their seats. Right. So, it wasn't just Stuart they've gone after. They've gone after others. They'll be coming after me. They're going to, this is what the establishment does. They come over in South America and, other places that they'll shoot political dissidents, with their gun and it. But in the Western world, certainly in Jersey, is they destroy you financially. They destroy you. They discredit you. They do it a lot more discreetly than shooting you in the head. But they do.
That's nice. It's very nice. Yes, nice of them. But these are all people who were trying to expose the cover-up. The people who are getting bankrupted or imprisoned. The people who are perpetrators, you were saying, haven't had any. Have they had any convictions?
There was, I think, 8. Now, I think there's 121 living suspects, if I remember. I'm quite sure there's 121 living suspects. Now, don't forget, they got rid of Graham Power and got rid of Lenny Harper to this stage. And there were 8 prosecutions Eight people went to court, I think it was, and only 7 got prosecuted.
Yeah, they cover that in the documentary, don't they?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But going back to the ironic thing about who gets suspended and who doesn't get suspended, is the chief of police was suspended, say possibly illegally. That the way he was suspended has been criticised by just about everybody. You know, anybody who's looked into it. And I'm talking, there was the Napier report, there was the independent care inquiry report, there was it's all these reports have criticised how he was suspended, why he was suspended. But there was the chief executive officer who has been named in the public domain and named at the care inquiry, a man called Mario Lundy. He was the top man at the education department, the CEO of our education department. He was being investigated as a priority witness by Operation Rectangle. So he was being investigated by Graham Power's police force.
He's the guy in charge of the schools?
Yeah, he was.
Right, okay.
And I think he took early retirement. But, you know, he was being investigated by Operation Rectangle, by Graham Power's police force. So as a neutral act, he should have and could have been suspended whilst the police investigation, because it was about other things being investigated for. But he wasn't suspended. So, but the police officer, so that the chief of police gets suspended at the drop of a hat on a pack of lies that it's been shown to be. But an alleged perpetrator doesn't get suspended. You know.
Mm. And then were there 7 convictions, or was it just 7 prosecutions? Did some of them get acquitted?
I think there was 8 prosecutions, 7 convictions, if I remember.
And what kind of people were convicted? What kind of people ended up being convicted?
The low-lying fruit, basically. Mm-hmm. They were just pretty much. I remember writing a blog about it. I think it's called "The Lions Sleep Tonight." What it was, they got some people. They were, nobody of any real senior management, nobody of any real stature. Were doing it. It was, there was one particular case now of a lad. I don't think it'd be fair to name him. He has been convicted, but he was a paedophile. Now, he had abused people, but he'd grown up in Haute de la Garenne, where he was taught, look, he
was introduced to it there.
Better.
Right.
He was introduced to it there. And the big question on my mind, I'm not condoning any way, shape or form what he did by abusing other children. But I do ask the question, wasn't he just as much a victim as he was a perpetrator? Because, his whole life he had grown up in this, and it was probably normal to him. It's a big discussion to be had around this sort of subject. I know we haven't got time to do that today. So he was one of the people that were convicted.
I think there was someone who ran a foster care home, wasn't there?
A foster carer?
But in charge of a couple. Am I right?
Well, the Maguires, no. Well, the Maguires, they did. This is the whole problem. Maguires was almost, and Lenny Harper will tell you, it's almost like an open and shut case. They could have and should have been prosecuted, but we believe, were wholly and utterly protected by the establishment. The Maguires should have been. They were the ones doorstepped in France, Alan Maguire. And Jane Maguire was his. They'd been abusing children, again, for decades, for years and years and years. Yeah. And back in, I think it was 1990 or something, I'm not often with the dates, they were in court, and Alan Maguire was said to have had a terminal illness. So it's pointless, if you like, carrying on the prosecution against him, or, going after this, because he's probably going to be dead in a few months. Well, of course. 10 years later, there he was in France, as sprightly as you like, attacking cameramen as fit as a butcher's dog. Well, hang on a minute. So his, and it was, we were told he's dying of cancer, and that's one of the reasons they're not going to carry on the prosecution here in France. So they never got prosecuted. I think one other person, like I say, 7 of them, but they were all low-lying fruit. There are people way above them who have a lot more to answer for. You know, that there was a few scapegoats, a few lambs thrown to the lions, lambs to the slaughter idea to say, well, look, yeah, you know, we do take this child abuse seriously over here. You know, here's some prosecutions. But they were, you know, in the bigger scheme of things, there's some, again, I'm not condoning what any of these people did. They all deserve to be prosecuted, you know, every single one of them. But what about the ones who enabled it? What about the ones who covered it up? Or, you know, what about the ones that are perpetrators themselves? All these people are still around, you know. And again, which brings us onto the Jimmy Savile sketch here, sort of thing, because when Jimmy Savile was a regular visitor to Jersey and Britain's most prolific paedophile, now of course he was coming to Jersey on a regular basis. Now, in this, what I've learned in these paedophile rings, a paedophile doesn't think, right, I'm going to go to with such a high profile as Jimmy Savile. Don't think, well, I'm going to go to Jersey and hope I get lucky, for want of a better expression, and, you know, hopefully abuse a child. Well, all this is put in place for these paedophiles before they get here. So my question is, who are these people? Who are these people that looked after and catered for Jimmy Savile when he was coming over here? They're still around. Where are they? But this question has never, ever been asked. But, you know, because we've got a compliant and complicit mainstream media over here. They don't ask difficult questions.
Even now, they're the same. Even now, they haven't learnt their lesson. They're the same, aren't they?
Well, they're getting away with it. They don't need to learn a lesson. Yeah.
No, you know, but what they weren't ready for back in 2007, because the internet was still quite a new thing back then. You know, I don't know if Facebook had been invented then, but, you know, it was all still. But they try to do things the way they've always done things, our establishment, knowing that they've got the media, you know, in their pocket. They think, well, you know, this will just blow over. When I'm sure it was sold to Andrew Lewis, the Home Affairs Minister, who possibly illegally suspended the Chief of Police. I'm sure it was said to him, look, get rid of the Chief of Police. No one's going to be talking about this in a couple of months. Like, just suspend him, like, you know, and the media will make sure no one will be talking about this in a couple of months. Well, they didn't factor in the internet back then.
No.
And of course, that's when it all just took off, you know. So they couldn't get away with as much as, and even now they can't get away with it as much as they could back then, despite them trying to put in lots of legislation against free speech over here. You know, and
what's that about? Can you just explain what they're doing to prevent free speech?
Well, they updated or amended the Harmful Jersey Telecommunications Law. It was P100 or P189. I can't remember. They brought this amendment to the Jersey Telecommunications Law, where it's an offence to offend somebody online. And it's not only that, so the way it works out, so if I was to call a friend of mine, you know, a twat or something online, and you think, oh, that's Neil, he always does that, you know, then he's not offended. But if somebody else reading that is offended,
right,
because you told your friend that,
complaints.
Right?
Because I said it to my friend, it's somebody else has seen it online, it's offended them, so a criminal complaint can be made against me. So what they've done now is over here, and I think they're doing it pretty much in the UK as well, but I know over here they're just putting in legislation to basically shut down free speech. You know, on a daily basis, you've got our mainstream media attacking social media, as if the mainstream media have got nothing to answer for, sort of idea. You know, there's good and bad in social media, but there's just as much good and bad in the mainstream media.
Yeah.
Also, our latest social survey done over here, it's only 37% of those surveyed trust the local mainstream media over here. And I think that could be a direct result from their reporting or non-reporting on the stuff of Operation Rectangle. I think that it certainly opened up my eyes of how complicit and crooked the mainstream media are. That was, you know, because of Operation Rectangle, I realised how complicit the media are.
There have been some helpful journalists from outside the area, though, haven't there? Leah McGrath Goodman. She was locked up at Heathrow Airport, wasn't she, at one point?
Oh yeah, absolutely horrifying what happened to Leah McGrath Goodman. Absolutely horrifying. She was been coming over here for years, and then she was going to be reporting on the child abuse, the Operation Rectangle back in, I think, 2008.
Was she freelance?
American.
Was she with any particular newspaper or media?
I think she writes for lots of different newspapers.
Right, okay.
I think she was with, I'm not sure if she was with Newsweek at that time, but she certainly was at some time with Newsweek. And there'd never been any problems with her visas. Never, she'd always, never, no problems with her visas, no problems with anything. And then she went to the, the immigration, just to sort out her visas and that. And they said, what are you writing on? She said, hope to the Garen, child abuse and everything. Well, that was it. From then, she, cut a long story short, she was, her card was marked, basically. That didn't exist. They mucked her out for so long. Anyway, when she's coming back to the UK, she was, had her collar felt at Heathrow Airport, I think it was. All because she had been tagged by the Jersey immigration people. She was put in a windowless cell at Heathrow Airport for, I think, 12 hours. I think it was 8 hours before they even asked her a question. So, I think it would be great if you could ever talk with Leah, because it's what she went through was horrendous. It was horrific. And she was banned. She was banned from the UK and Jersey.
Because of the danger presented. Yeah.
Yeah. This is a Western. This is something you would expect in North Korea. Because when she was at Heathrow Airport, she wasn't allowed to contact her consulate. She wasn't allowed to contact a lawyer. It was explained to her that she had no rights, because where Heathrow, you're still not admitted into the jurisdiction of the UK. So she was treated worse than a bloody terrorist. And of course, Deputy Trevor Pittman and a UK politician and others set up a petition to get her visa restored, because she was banned from Jersey for 2 years. That attracted thousands of signatures. And again, to cut a long story short, she was finally allowed back in Jersey. And whilst the independent Jersey care inquiry was going on, the establishment were very friendly with her. Couldn't do enough for her, because they knew that the eyes of the world, the media was on Jersey at the time. But as soon as the independent Jersey care inquiry left, that's it. Everything back to normal again, and they're being as difficult as they possibly can be to Leah, all because she was they've asked to see the transcripts of her books before she's allowed back in the island. They've asked to see what they want to know, who she's going to be interviewing. I mean, this is just, before they'll allow her back in the island. This is North Korea stuff.
It is, isn't it?
I really hope you do get an opportunity to talk to Leah.
I'm trying.
What we'd like to do, Neil, is to have a break, but to come back and actually understand a bit more about the structure of government in Jersey, so that we can understand how this can possibly happen in what seems to be, an island very close to one of the oldest democracies. And perhaps we can come back and ask you about that in a while.
Yeah, please do.